Drew McIntyre sent a warning to not only Roman Reigns in the original Bloodline on this week's edition of SmackDown, but he also confronted Solo Sikoa in the new version of the Bloodline on this show, which was a taped episode. So if you already looked at the spoilers, you knew what was going to happen in most segments. You didn't probably know exactly what Kevin Owens was going to say because they didn't want to give away the finish to that match last weekend on Saturday night's main event between him and Cody Rhodes. But we'll talk about Kevin Owens sending a warning of his own. Lots of warnings thrown out on this SmackDown in a second. But let's start with Drew McIntyre because, I told you, I did a video this week. One of the things that I'm most excited about with the current iteration of WWE is their ability to embrace history and how they are embracing that to tell storylines in the present. And this was another scenario right here that told you exactly the way Triple H looks at this kind of stuff, right? And I'm glad because I appreciate this so much because I feel like, again, going back to the previous regime, it wasn't always a case of embracing history. It was often ignoring some of the history between certain superstars and then just going with it anyways. Not the case here. 2 years ago, Clash at the Castle, Drew McIntyre, his potential big moment, right? His big opportunity to defeat Roman Reigns and become the undisputed Universal Champion, I guess it was at the time. But who played a role in that? Well, Drew confronted that person here, Solo Sikoa, and I think that is what I mean by them going back now to this point, because we already knew going into the show, Drew McIntyre's goal was to basically be the Bloodline hunter, right? He's coming after Roman Reigns. He's already taken out Jey Uso, Sami Zayn, and then we had an interaction where Jimmy Uso tries to get a little bit of his, revenge here after Drew came after him last week. So Jimmy hits McIntyre with the crutch here. They go running off into the crowd. But the bigger story is the fact that Drew McIntyre was not just going to sit around and go after Roman Reigns and the current people that are aligned with Roman Reigns, right? He was also going to come back around to Solo Sikoa because he did, as Drew said, cost him everything, right? And what he did to him, who knows how much different. And Michael Cole, I thought, did a great job on commentary. If you go back and listen to it, Michael Cole was excellent here, bringing up the fact that many are saying that the downfall of Drew McIntyre started with that particular, development, right? The fact that he could not win that championship at Clash at the Castle. And again, Solo Sikoa plays a role in that. So McIntyre is sitting there talking about, he's kind of 50-50 on what he's going to do here. Does he beat Solo's ass, or does he sit here and realize that him and Solo have the same goal, right? And that is to destroy Roman Reigns and this version of the Bloodline, which Solo will get his opportunity in Tribal Combat on the January 6th Raw on Netflix debut. And so I thought that was just a great way to tie it all back together to where at some point you're coming back around to Drew McIntyre and Solo Sikoa. And what will that look like? That could be 6 months from now. That could be a year from now. And I've said it's going to be interesting to see where each of these two guys are at, right? With Drew McIntyre, he's about to go through this stuff with the Bloodline. And I would think eventually you're going to get a match with Roman Reigns and Drew McIntyre at some point. I don't think that's the WrestleMania match because we talked about the rumor yesterday that the WrestleMania match may now be Roman Reigns and CM Punk. And I love the feedback from you guys on that because I was curious to know what you thought about that possibility and whether you think that's going to happen. But for McIntyre, I said he's someone out there, don't know exactly what the WrestleMania match could be. Could it be against Jey? Could you have some different combinations like that for Drew McIntyre maybe going into WrestleMania 41 season? And so you have McIntyre now making it clear that he's not going to forget the past. And so where's Solo at 6 months from now, a year from now? I don't think it's the leader of the Bloodline. I can tell you that. We've mentioned that many times on videos on this channel. I don't think Solo's going to be the tribal chief after January the 6th. But what happens after that, right? What's the dynamic between Solo, Jacob Fatu, and the Tongans? When does The Rock come back into this thing? There's so many questions. So I think it is kind of intriguing to at least just leave that sitting for right now, that Drew McIntyre and Solo Sikoa are going to cross paths at some point again in the future. And I think that's what they're doing so well. It's just being able to tie in all this stuff of, I mentioned it, right? It's consequences. Actions have consequences. And the Bloodline's actions having consequences is the story of this entire thing right now with Roman Reigns and everyone else. It's the fact of what they did is now causing all of these rifts across the board, whether it's between Kevin Owens and Cody Rhodes, whether it's between Seth Rollins and CM Punk, right? You just keep going down the line. There are so many different things that now they are the central sort of figure in, and that's why it's working so well, because they were the dominant force for so long. Reigns was the top star for so long, and now everything they did is coming back to them. And, you have so many more, like I said, not even the Drew McIntyre Solo Sikoa thing. Everybody was kind of waiting on when that could happen eventually, but it wasn't like, if you're ranking your top, on your list of what are the interactions you're most, waiting on to see, this probably wasn't one of the top 5 necessarily. But now that you think about it, you're like, oh yeah, like Drew McIntyre going to kick his ass probably, right? He's got no choice because Solo played a role in Drew McIntyre's downfall potentially. So yeah, I just thought this was a great way to do it. It's just a tiny little thing that I'm telling you makes a big difference, at least for me, and I would assume it does for others as well, because it's something that can keep these storylines going, and the fuel that's added to it now, knowing that it's not just Drew McIntyre buddy with Solo Sikoa and forgetting what he cost him 2 years ago. And I think that only adds to the reality kind of stuff we talk about, and it doesn't insult your intelligence. I say that so many times, but it's true. Like, thank you for not insulting our intelligence, because we know the history, and we know that there should be a reason that Drew McIntyre should want to get revenge on Solo Sikoa. And right now, they just happen to be somewhat aligned because they have a common goal. But that's going to change eventually. And so that's another thing that's kind of sitting out there that they can get back to in the future. Like I did say, though, Jimmy Uso attacking Drew, you would think you're going to get that match, kind of set up again here soon, probably just based on the way they're playing it out. And then we know, Jay's going to be the person that Drew's going to have that big singles match with at some point. We just don't know, again, when that could be. I mean, could that be something that happens a couple months down the road or whatever? But all these guys, you would think, are also going to be intertwined in the Royal Rumble. So I think that makes the Rumble even more fascinating this year too. So we'll see what happens moving forward with that. And like I said, there are some other things that you can look at for the spoilers on Raw to see what happens there and so forth to see what's next. So, all right. Now we get to the warning from Kevin Owens, because I said multiple warnings on this show. And Kevin Owens just kind of doing a pre-tape video here because, like I mentioned, it was pretty clear they didn't want to give away the finish. If they had taped something last week for this taped episode, then we would have known what was going to happen between Kevin Owens and Cody Rhodes. So, once again, WWE thinking 2 steps ahead here and having Kevin Owens kind of cut this promo about, and I love the direction they're going in, which everybody's been talking about it this week, but it is the delusional Kevin Owens who has taken the Winged Eagle championship and thinking that he is the rightful champion, right? And it's such a heel move, but it is also so different from the fact that, let's say Cody just beats Kevin Owens straight up, clean. We don't get like the ref bump and the visual 3 count from Kevin Owens on Cody Rhodes. Had that not happened, then you're like, okay, Kevin Owens, this is kind of silly, right? He's just walking around with the championship. We all saw it. Like he's just completely either lost it or whatever, because we saw it. Like he did not even ever in that match have a chance to beat Cody Rhodes. But because he did, and you saw the visual, spot there where he's hits it, there's no referee, he's covering Cody, the obvious 3 count if you have a referee in there, that makes it even better, because now it is a matter of saying, you know what, KO's got a point here, or you could say Kevin Owens is right, because just as the shirt says, there are some things about this that, again, make you very invested in what he's doing, because there are some elements where you're like, you know what, that dude's right. He is right. And so I think it makes it better too. And, he sends the warning here that what happens next is on you. And by you, he's basically meaning everyone else. Cody Rhodes, Nick Aldis, WWE officials, Triple H not specifically mentioned, but we know he's in there. So sending the warning that what happens next is on you. And what is going to happen next? Because we know they're going to play this up, over the next several weeks probably, where Owens has got the championship. He's going to keep walking around with this Winged Eagle title. Cody's going to sell this injury, and that's the way they're going to play it. And so when is the rematch, right? I think at this point, do they do part 2 at Saturday night's main event in January? That could seem like a realistic option, right? Because that gives Cody enough time to hold off. And then is that where things ramp up with the return of Randy Orton? Potentially, because Randy Orton's still out there selling the package pile driver, right? So it's all those things. And so now, you're trying to figure out how they're going to piece this all together. But like I said, too, yesterday, if you watch the video, a lot of that is going to depend on what is this WrestleMania 41 main event going to be. Because, if it is Cody and someone not named Randy Orton and Kevin Owens, well, then Randy Orton and Kevin Owens would seem like a pretty good option to do a WrestleMania 41 match. And then you have even more of a slow burn to get to Cody and Randy Orton, right? So that seems like another option that could be on the table, but it really all depends on what they're going to do with these 2 main events at WrestleMania 41. And like I mentioned on the video, there's such a huge domino effect with this. The Rock, Roman Reigns, CM Punk, Seth Rollins, keep going down the line, right? Gunther, John Cena, and you just keep saying, like, Kevin Owens, Cody Rhodes, Randy Orton. Like, there's so many of these top stars, and we just mentioned Drew McIntyre, Jey Uso, like Sami Zayn. Like, there are so many people that they kind of have in those top positions. There are so many combinations you can work with, and so it's going to be interesting to see how they continue to kind of develop this Cody and Kevin Owens thing. They're going to have the rematch soon enough, which, again, may not come until a month from now, the next Saturday night's main event. It's not going to happen on the Raw on Netflix, even though Cody probably should be there, but I would think they're not putting that on that show unless they're just wanting to make this the biggest show in the history of the company. Maybe, it's like you've already got Roman Reigns, Solo Sikoa, you got CM Punk, Seth Rollins, you got Rhea Ripley, Liv Morgan. I'm kind of joking about the biggest, show in the history of the company, but you get my point. Like, this is the biggest Raw ever. I've said that many times over the past couple months. This will be the biggest television/streaming show they've ever done in the history of the company. But when are they going to do that match? I think that's the big question coming out of this, but they could decide. They want to do it there, or they could hold off to the next Saturday night's main event. You could hold off to the Rumble, I guess, too, if you wanted to. So lots of different options you could do there because, Cody as the champion will need an opponent for the Royal Rumble, right? So there's a lot you can work with on this, but Kevin Owens has warned everyone that whatever happens next, it's on all of us. Specifically, though, Cody, Nick Aldis, and WWE officials. But elsewhere on this show, you had the continued sort of tease with Bianca Belair and Naomi. They're having fun with this Jade Cargill thing because they're doing these backstage interactions with Bianca and Naomi just to kind of continue to shove it in our face that, you may think you think it's this person, but it could be this person, right? And you had the language here. Of course, Bianca and Naomi, let's get to the bigger part. They did successfully defend the Women's Tag Team Championships, beating Nia Jax and Candice LeRae after Tiffany Stratton comes to ringside after she was ordered by Candice LeRae not to come to ringside. Tiffany comes out. Jax asks for the briefcase. Bianca knocks her off the apron. That allows Bianca and Naomi to get the win there when Naomi pinning Candice LeRae. But so you're going to have that story continue to be told between the heels and their frustration with Tiffany Stratton, which, again, is just building up week after week to where when Tiffany does cash that briefcase in, the pop's going to be even bigger. But with Bianca and Naomi, backstage, they're having the promo before the match, and it's Bianca saying, I know that Naomi's always got my back and all these things, right? So they're adding in that little bit of language here about, making you wonder, is it this person or is it this person? And you would think right now, as I said, the two biggest suspects are the ones staring you right in the face, and that's Bianca and Naomi. So the way they're playing this up, I really like that because I think it works well for the story they're trying to tell. But now that they have the championships, should they lose those titles, then you can, again, kind of play around with that dynamic of, okay, well, did this person lose because, they're actually the person who attacked Jade, or lots of different things that you can play in with that. So I thought that was an interesting development there, continuing to kind of have those teases to lead you in a certain direction. But Naomi earns her title here by, again, first time they've actually had the match with her as the substitute tag team champion. So she earns that opportunity now, and we'll see how they play with this moving forward on that. But elsewhere on this show, you did everything else I thought was sort of go back to the Bloodline. They did have the opening match. No surprise, right? They get the win over LA Knight, Andrade, and Apollo Crews. Still, kind of one of those things where it's interesting to see LA Knight in the spot, but I see why they're doing it, right? Because it wasn't really just about LA Knight and the Bloodline here. It was about LA Knight and continuing the feud with Shinsuke Nakamura. And so even though he's having to team up with two guys that, quite frankly, just have not been elevated on the card right now, in Andrade and Apollo Crews, you kind of get him out of it by having Shinsuke Nakamura, interfere. And so they're going to get that rematch at some point soon. We know that. But Solo looking strong at the end of this match. That's what, again, they wanted to do heading into this big match with Roman Reigns. And so that was kind of something that we pretty much expected them to win that six-man. I don't think there's any doubt. But you kind of keep LA Knight out of that a little bit by having him kind of go back to the Shinsuke Nakamura stuff. You had Alex Shelley and Johnny Gargano. We kind of knew what the finish was going to be here. They were teasing it all night about how Shelley's telling Chris Sabin, hey, don't come out to the ring with me. Let's see if Gargano is man enough to do the same. So you have Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa talking in the back, and you can tell Ciampa's like, sure, I'll stay back here. And we knew he was going to come out, and so he does. And then eventually, little shenanigans, handful of tights, Johnny Gargano gets the win. So I'm liking the DIY heel stuff. I think it's just a freshen up that they needed on the main roster because I just felt like it was pretty much not really going the direction that they necessarily needed it to go in. And so they could have done the split and the one-on-one again. Sure, it would have been a great rivalry, but I think this is something a little bit different. So I like how they're playing with, just Gargano continuing to embrace his heel role here a little bit. So I like that on this show. And, the other stuff, you had the rematch between Carmelo and Braun Strowman. I'll just be honest with you, this was not my favorite thing. I mean, look, not that Carmelo won, but like just the way you did it, right? You had the Grayson Waller effect leading into it. Just kind of a sort of lame duck segment just to get you to Carmelo in the rematch with Braun Strowman, and then he wins via the count out after Braun just, throws him back into the ring, and all of a sudden the referee's at 10. So, I mean, I feel like they've got something, bigger plan for Carmelo Hayes, but I told you guys, I wonder if that is just going to be basically a waiting period until you get Trick Williams on the main roster, and then you kind of, reheat things up with those two guys in some way, shape, or form. But I also said, moving Carmelo in the draft, that's someone I would definitely consider moving to Raw because I think you can get into feuds with Braun Breaker and those kind of guys if Braun's still in the brand. So I just think that's something I'd consider right now because this just feels like sort of a transition program for Carmelo to get him to the next thing. Braun's the new acquisition on SmackDown, so they're featuring him. But, other than that, this was what it was. It gives Carmelo his win back, I guess, but by count out, it's not exactly doing a whole lot there on that. So that was it, really, on this week's edition of SmackDown, guys. This was a taped episode. You can sort of just tell. This was one that, they added in a lot of stuff. You had the Chelsea Green highlights from, the Saturday Night's Main Event promo she did after the show and all that. But this was really centered around the biggest stories, as we keep saying, which really the top three, the McIntyre Bloodline stuff, Kevin Owens sending a message to Cody and everyone else. And then you did have kind of the continued development with the women's division there in the main event. So that was this week's SmackDown. Let me know your thoughts of the show. As always, appreciate your feedback, guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the like button on your way out. Lots more fun stuff here coming at Wrestling Reaction on the road to the Royal Rumble and WrestleMania 41. So appreciate you watching as always, and let me know your thoughts on this week's edition of WWE SmackDown.